Hello, innovators. I'm Todd Weyandt, and welcome to the Bridging the Gap podcast presented by Great Tech Group. You're invited to join our conversation to model the future of construction innovation and the digital transformation adventure of this great industry. My guest today is Shelley Copsey. She is the co-founder and CEO of FYLD. Shelley leads a venture that empowers frontline teams and managers in infrastructure and utilities to make data-driven decisions in real time, leading to greater safety, productivity, and quality assurance. She has over 20 years of experience in the intersection of physical infrastructure and digital technologies, as well as the human transformation required to deliver on the promise of emerging technologies. Welcome to the show, Shelley.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I like to get started with how you got into this industry to begin with. What's your origin story into it?
I actually kind of fell into it. I was a chartered accountant as I came out of university. I went into one of the big consulting firms. I was living in a smaller town at that point in time where you just have to be a little bit of a jack of all trades. And I remember one day someone tapped me on the shoulder and they're like, if you go up to Sydney with our firm, I was living in Australia at the time, they said like the infrastructure practice up there is heaving and they need a few more people with the kind of skill sets and attitude that you've got. As I'm prone to doing, 24 hours later, I found myself on a plane. And next thing you know, I was like, sitting in an advisory practice to the infrastructure sector. Quite funnily, the first seat that I ever got put in when I landed in Sydney, which has got some fabulous towers. It was right looking down the harbour, and I would watch the big ships come and go. And I think there was something between watching these massive pieces of equipment, advising the industry. I just quickly fell in love with working with absolute real world problems. And getting to know the people in this industry who just really want to do a great job serving the communities that they live in and they work for. And I've been in it ever since.
Yeah, that's awesome. So 24-hour turnaround of you hearing about it and then getting on a plane and going. What was that process like? It's a whirlwind.
Yeah, it's a bit how I am. I did the same when I moved to the UK. I still laugh to this day that I gave my kids 48 hours notice that we're shifting to a new country. I don't know. I think if I'm all in on something, I'm all in. And I just, I think in the main, you can make things happen very quickly. It's probably also why I run a technology company. I like to do things at pace.
Yeah, that's awesome. So it's an interesting dichotomy there, okay? Because in construction and utilities, they're industries that are very much steeped in
Mm.
tradition, and this is the way we've done it. Bringing on new technology is sometimes can be seen as a slower evolution. So what convinced you that hey, this is a great space for tech?
Yeah.
AI can work here. It can be practical, and it can be a game changer.
Yeah, I just think, across the last 5 years in particular, we've seen a number of trends emerge, which is really letting technology have a different place in our industry. I mean, if we start with the skilled labour shortage, I personally am the person that doesn't necessarily believe that we have one, right? At FYLD, we track 35% standing time on site, but we definitely have got, the ageing workforce who are leaving. We can't attract enough people in to replace them, so we need to think differently. So I think there's kind of that dynamics going on. Over the last 12, 24 months, I think, we've all got ChatGPT at home, and we've seen people in this industry just begin to, I guess, more consciously make use of some of these tools in their home lives. And I think
Mhm.
you kind of just look at some of this stuff. You look at, 5G networks that we can keep people connected more easily. That's, emerged over the last 5 years. I think that there's been a number of factors changing that actually means right at the moment we're seeing, the great leaders in our industry begin to think very differently about how adopting technology. Firstly, and most importantly, it can keep people safe. It can let people walk out the front door knowing that they'll go home. But also, when we've got capacity constraints, when we've got financial constraints, how it can actually let us do more with what we've got and do better quality. So actually, right at the moment, I think it's faster than it's ever been, and it's definitely an exciting place to be.
Yeah, I 100% agree. And yeah, it's interesting that you point to the last 5 years because there's been this explosion kind of since the start of COVID. It happened a bit before COVID, but I think that was like a light bulb moment for a
Yes.
lot of people that it forced people into digital practices. And it was like, oh, it works. It's stable. We got this. It's not the as big of jump as what some people were maybe thinking beforehand.
No, and often you just need a catalyst in industry, don't you? You kind of take the fact, like, particularly the utilities that we work with, that they couldn't stop having the energy and the water run to our houses. And we see a lot of our customers, they maybe make what with hindsight wasn't the most optimal decision during that COVID period to get digitizing, but they made that first step. As you said, they realized, this isn't as hard as we thought. The results are kind of real. And I think we're now seeing people build on that early confidence and seeing some amazing things go on.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So you brought up risk, and I think the easy assumption is to equate risk with the safety incidents, especially in construction. But it can be more than just that. You listed a couple of things there too, with timelines and budgets, productivity, compliance, a whole bunch of different areas. Wonder if you can speak on kind of the expanded definition of what risk is.
I think for too long in this industry, when we talk about risk, we do just narrow it down to safety. I completely understand how important that is, right? These are humans going out onto site. But actually, when you begin to look at job sites, if I've got a site that's messy, A, yes, someone might get hurt. B, it probably won't get delivered in terms of what we want to deliver for the day, right? So what we always tend to see is it doesn't matter if it is an operational risk, a quality risk, a schedule risk, or a safety risk. They are also deeply interlinked. And I think actually one of the really good things of technology is you can almost get away from having to trade off how do I manage one or the other, right? So for how many years have people said, we can keep people safe, but we're going to have to invest more time? I think that those days are gone, right? If you've got like real-time visibility on sites, you can see risk from a multitude of angles, and you can say, actually, that site looks messy. That just means that throughout the day, you're going to waste stacks of time walking away around in ways that you shouldn't. So we lose productivity, and you might trip and hurt yourself. So we've got safety risk. I actually think, some of our best customers are really reimagining risk and saying, let's figure out how to eliminate it within reasonable practical bounds from a multitude of angles, because we know the end result is going to be a far stronger ability to deliver to the schedule with every person going home on time, high quality, and without cost blowouts.
Yeah. So I want to dig into that a bit more, because I think there's a lot of really cool stuff there that you just said. How should companies move from kind of the reactive safety mindset to more proactive operational safety? What does that shift on the ground look like for the teams that are out there on the field?
Yeah. So I think first and foremost, because we haven't had great technologies at the point of work, there's still a lot of folklore in industry about why people get hurt, right? And every industry has this until it hits a digital transformation. When people say to me, our leading cause of injury on the work site is a slip, trip and fall, it's not a slip, trip and fall, right? It's that the workplace wasn't set up correctly. I'll go back a step. It wasn't planned correctly. What I think digital is really enabling from a safety perspective is us to back up right to the origins of a job, how it was designed, how it was planned, how it was laid out, to then understanding when the worker arrived on site, what was their understanding of risk and how did they control it, to letting remote managers, if you use AI, you can help them understand the sites that are highest risk, helping to get more eyes. How did a job play out? And, at the moment, we don't have the right data sets to eliminate. But then the sites that do have something go wrong, we've got this really rich pattern of data backed up right to when, a clever person designed what was going to be built or what have you that day. And I see over the next 3 to 5 years, as companies like FYLD build that data set on scale, our ability right at the front end to help the design and engineering firms manage risk out of the design process, to help companies when they first do the survey and they do the planning of how they're going to carry out that design to do that bit better, right down to, and this is the utopia of me, and actually the UK government has given us £2 million to try and crack this one. I send some really experienced people to a site that looks like it should be plain vanilla. Can you predict which of those sites is going to have catastrophic failure at 3 o'clock in the afternoon? Right? Data and digital gives us a chance to really reimagine, like, what is the root cause? Can I see it emerging in real time and let me stop it eventuating? All of this post process world of something's gone wrong, let me investigate. To me, in 20, 30 years, like, that world should be completely disappearing, hopefully way sooner, but we don't have good data. I just see a world where we stop things in their tracks and we stop having people investigate why people died or got seriously hurt on site. And, at FYLD, we do way more than just safety, but I'll tell you something that gets all of us out of bed in the morning. It's knowing that we're building towards that future where this industry is fundamentally different in terms of worker outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So my brain goes to the change management that's required for it's a pretty fundamental mindset shift. You said something interesting too with the designers being able to design something that takes out that kind of operational safety risk in the design. And so really moving that to not just the GC and the sub
Yes.
mindset of, hey, it's your responsibility, but it's the designer's responsibility when they're designing the building to think about safety. What do you see as required in that mindset shift? Because that's a pretty
It's a big
radical
one.
way to think about.
Yeah, it is. I think that we're already beginning to see your GCs and your SCs think in the way that we're thinking, right? Like
Hmm.
the buy-in that we're getting to, we can predict high-risk sites, and without actually really needing transformation. Like if you do really good design, you can just make this an intuitive way of working. I think, though, the friction point of going back from the GC who owns the labour force back to the planner is a different level of friction. What I do expect, though, and I think you see patterns of this in many different industries, as the GCs and SCs get their on-site risk levels down, they're going to get down to the 5-10% that they can't manage out on site and where they continue to see problems. I'm expecting that we're just going to see contractual requirements like, that this site, when it's delivered, provided we do A, B, C, and D, we're not going to have incidents. I think we'll see differences in contracts. I think we'll see the best design firms just, they'll know it's a competitive advantage to design for safety better. Some of them are already doing it, but I think that it'll be done at scale and become normal.
I would love to hear, is there a real kind of world example of how you've helped with the AI driven workflows to help actually reduce the delays, incidents, and make it all work in practice there?
Yeah. Let's start with safety since we've spoken about that a lot. When
Yeah.
our field worker gets to site, we get them to take a 60 to 90-second video for us. We use natural language processing so we can understand what they understand about their risk. We use computer vision. So can we see things that they haven't seen? A, so we can tell them, like, there could be this, do you agree, disagree? But B, so we can help our customers understand, like, what are your field workers not seeing? And then last of all, we can use geospatial reasoning engines. So there's a school around the corner, traffic's going to get really heavy. There's a weather pattern coming through. If you're going to be doing heavy lifting operations this afternoon, you might replan your day, right? So as soon as someone gets to site, we really help them instantly say, how do we make sure I'm set up for a really safe day, right? The next thing that we see in our industry on repeat is that people need permits to do all sorts of things.
Hmm.
What we often find, though, is that the field worker isn't necessarily thinking ahead 2-3 hours to the permit that they're going to need. And then they get to the point they need it, there's downtime, right? This just adds up across a big field crew.
Hmm.
We, in the morning, once they've actually done that 60 to 90-second video, we make predictions about the types of permits that they might need as their day goes on, right? So we can get those permits put in place electronically, largely driven with AI and AI agents, so that when they actually hit that point of needing a permit, there's not an hour or two of downtime, permits in place, let's keep going, right? Let's now kind of get towards the end of the day. We know how long a job should take. Field worker has told us when they've started with that start of day assessment. They haven't told us of any standing time, and the day's come to the end. Again, we can begin to look with AI and say, did this job look normal? Does it look like maybe something took a bit longer? If we can't logically identify any reason that it's gone longer, we can just instantly ask the field worker, like, what's gone on today that this job took longer? And let's not here cast blame. These are complex environments and AI is not going to find everything. But if what your goal is that your customer can understand what it takes to do a job, even the ground truth data of a field worker explaining why something went longer means that the next time they do activity, they can schedule way better. So we're always using this data to try and predict how your day's operations going to unfold and how can we stop you getting hurt? How can we stop that downtime?
Yeah, that's really cool. So I'm curious on the reception of the field workers coming in. They're getting scanned. How do you deal with some of the privacy concerns, or why do I have to learn this to get it in? How do you deal with some of that? Overcome those objections?
So let's start the customer satisfaction score that we get from field workers of using our
Yeah,
product, just running at 8 out of 10, right? This is
nice.
unheard of for mobility
Yeah.
style applications in the field. I think first and foremost, we get the workers to take the video. So nobody's videoing them, nobody's doing anything to them. We've put this into their hands to help them do their job easier, right? I think that that's first and foremost. People often say to me, oh, could we put a camera on the van and watch them and you analyze it all day? Like, you and me are not going to have people film us all day and tell our bosses what we did or didn't do, right? Let's give some dignity to the field worker. But I think that that's been fundamental. It's the power in their hands. Next up, from the get-go with field, well, like, let's help the field worker to do better, because that will flow to the back office, right? We're not starting with helping the back office by asking the field worker to do more. Even if they do something for us, we in real time will run analysis as to whether, like, they've given us a quality video that's going to help us understand what's going on site. If the quality isn't high, we say to them instantly, oh, it'd be a bit better if you could just scan your video a bit more, right? So we don't let them do something poor and make that available to their manager. We try and coach them and let them do better. And then I think, finally, we've got case studies showing like a 48% reduction on serious injuries and deaths on sites, like a couple of these now. They know that, if you think about giving a gift to your user, the gift of going home safely every day is a pretty big one. I think when you package it all together, we get really strong adoption. We've got unionised workforces, non-unionised. Once people begin to see that this is not about sacking people or blame games, it's about that these companies that we work with are just trying to figure out, how can I deliver my program of work? We get to really good outcomes with the field workers, which is great to see.
Yeah. I love the approach that you guys are taking with really starting with the field workers in mind and the what's in it for them. And, even the workflow of it, of what makes the most sense for them to get them better, give them benefits, not necessarily the back office. Because all too often with technology is people start with the back office of, this is going to be so great for them, and then just kind of cram it down the field. And so when they get it, they're like, when they're trying to replace me with tech, where I think the approach that you're doing is a healthy balance there.
Thank you.
So one of the big issues on job site is lack of communication, or having good communication. A stat that I saw, 75% of professionals are reporting delays due to miscommunication. From your perspective, what's the human or maybe cultural side of helping to solve this problem along with technology?
Yeah. If I just go to the human side, at the moment there is a data set that's like collected or created and like boom, in the moment it disappears, right? I've got a delay, I'm going to call someone and I'm going to tell them about it. It doesn't go into any recordable system. You're hoping that the person that you called has like logged this problem somewhere, but no doubt the moment they hang up from you, their phone's ringing with someone else, right? But I don't like beat around the bush. This data set exists today, just that we lose it in the moment of creation, right? To me, what we need on these job sites is a communication platform that's actually enterprise grade. We can't have things lost in WhatsApp and what have you. You can't do any level of analytics. What I've always found though is one of the biggest friction points is you might have like your asset owner on one communication platform. You might have your GC on another, your SC on another. You then bring in a specialist, they're on another. There's no harmonization or collaboration across these platforms. Again, a design choice we made when we built Field was like, let whoever's buying the product, let them have personas that bring in all of these extra people. So it's not confined to your enterprise. You need permission levels. You don't want everybody seeing everything about your business, but arrange it around a job and give them the access. And we find that using communication on our platform is one of the highest features, because A, there's a common view in real time about what's being discussed, but B, a lot of the problems that go on site, they have to be solved with human ingenuity. They might need a supply crew to come out, what have you. But let's collect that data. And I think all too often at the moment, it's lost in a WhatsApp, and you don't see that, over the last 2 weeks, 100 jobs stalled for, reason X, and it is lost in WhatsApp and you can't track it. And it's actually one of the really cool bits of our platform. You've got the communication about it. You've also got the logging of why it stopped. But I think you need to start with a fundamental approach that it is not too often that everybody on a work site works for one organization, and yet we're using technology platforms and communication systems which are siloed between those organizations. It's just not right fit for the modern age.
Right. Yeah. And then we complain that it's all siloed and you can't access it. Or what channel did they just send that to me on?
Exactly. So, but arrange it around a job and actually searching by job for things. And also, the other thing that we've just launched is like effectively an LLM style interface, so conversational interface with these videos. So again, like the ability for people now, like, can you tell me all the jobs last week where this happened? right? But you need things arranged around jobs in a really smart ontology to be able to get to a point where people can search and get insight. But first, you've got to have usability. Otherwise, the rest of these cool features are potentially quite useless.
Yeah. Yeah. So what role does trust play then? Both in the tech side as well as in trust in leadership. What role does that play when you're talking, really bringing AI and making that adoption successful?
Yeah. It's interesting. Over the time we've been commercializing FYLD, we've come across a small number of organizations that will say things to us like, oh, I don't know if I want a video on site. What if something goes wrong? That's to me almost just displaying a corporate culture that is not moving forward to being based on trust. Most people in these organizations, I find, salt of the earth, right? Like they're out in treacherous conditions quite often, doing dangerous jobs, sun beating down, rain beating down. You have to start with the right company culture, right? Technology does not replace a culture of I value my people in the field. What I think, though, technology really can do before we even get to how it works and trust is I find like the work of a lot of field workers is quite invisible to head office. So they theoretically know that these people are doing a great job out there, but your C-suite person, your COO, your regional manager, they can't get out to all the jobs and see. I think we actually begin to build trust because we let our field workers show the great job that they're doing. When they, get hit with downtime, they're able to communicate, here's went wrong and here's where I'm standing. And you almost begin to remove the blame culture of, oh, did they just not tell us? Did they take a bit long? Right. So I think you need to start with the right culture, but you can actually improve the culture through technology. But then last of all, like as a technology vendor and when you work in AI, I think it's just incredibly important that your results are explainable. We spend a lot of time we've got like lots of industry experts at FYLD, and we manually review what is coming into the platform and what is the outcome, and we make sure that the AI is behaving as we'd expect it to behave. And I think that that's a really strong advantage. And we see lots of people obviously playing around with, can I use ChatGPT in a business workflow? Comes with like quite a lot of dangers because it's facing out into the world and what's happened in the world. It's not facing into like internal governance standards. As you know, I think that there can be real advantages to working with companies that will actually sit and say, are the results of this AI what we intended? And you can only do that with industry expertise.
Mm-hmm. Love that. There's a lot of really good nuggets in there. One of the lines that I want to pull is, you were talking about the mistake and kind of the blame game that happens there. I think that's a really great point and a good kind of mindset shift that's needed in construction. I'm seeing it happen, but I think it needs to be more that the mistakes is not something to be shameful about and cast blame on others. That's the key prime learning opportunity moment to then go, okay, what happened? What went wrong here? And then how do we avoid that moving forward? If we're shifting the blame and we're in shame and trying to hide that and sweep it under the rug, you're going to keep making those mistakes and you're not going to learn from that. So pulling that out into the light and doing a little analysis on it is actually the smart move, not hiding that.
I agree. When we see like lots of our remote managers, someone on the field might log the reason why they're stopped, or they might log a safety observation. Again, I think where technology supports culture is those people probably didn't know in the past if the remote manager that maybe they don't know so well was supportive. But all of a sudden, when you chuck it in a platform and the person, responds within 3 minutes, really appreciate you bringing this to our attention, again, you get this positive reinforcement of culture of actually people here aren't looking to shift blame. They want to understand what's going on so we can do process redesign and get our work sites to be better. So technology can be a really good enabler of that culture, not even cultural change. The culture existed, but it wasn't necessarily visible to the field worker.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. So it's a great spotlight on shining the light on whatever the state of the culture is, hopefully in the good, but it shines that light for sure. So looking ahead, how do you see AI making the most impact over the next 3 to 5 years?
I see a few things going on here, right? The first one is we've got this aging, retiring workforce, and we've got new people coming in who we need to keep safe and productive doing high quality work, right? So I think it's how can we begin to find en masse, where are these productivity challenges? Why aren't people continuing to work all day? How do we then use technology to enable them better? So if I just take that example of lots of people retiring, junior people, can we get better supervision and more supervision of the junior people, because you can use platforms that let you supervise in real time and coach? Can you have a workforce where you've got the junior person, their accreditations are okay, but they haven't necessarily done that job before? Can you identify it and shoot them like some just-in-time learning, right? That magical concept from manufacturing, so that they're more likely to do the job right first time. I think there's that huge piece of the workforce changing. We know it, but we need to like figure out and crack that supervision, that learning. And I think we're going to see an explosion in productivity as we do. I think that's the first one. I think the second one is just paper. You often read the stats of how many times to the moon and back an average mega project, produces paper, and nobody can penetrate it. And we have like all of these back office people trying to sift through, looking for variations, who's to blame. Again, I think, the ability of emerging technologies over the last 12, 24 months to begin to break that process, and it is so broken, and let it be rebuilt in an efficient and like data-driven way. To me, those are my two big bets on where we're going to see AI have a massive transformation of the construction sector.
Yeah, that's awesome. If you could give a piece of advice to a construction leader really trying to embrace AI, maybe they're hesitant, maybe they're not, but they're trying to embrace it and they're looking at how do I do it more and do it well, what advice would you give them?
Firstly, I would look through your organization and say, where is there a problem that if I tackled it at scale is going to have massive impact, right? We often see people dabbling around with it in customer support and so forth. And yeah, maybe you can get a quick win in customer support, but is it actually your biggest cost center? And is it going to drive fundamental organizational change? The answer is probably no, right? So be brave and find where it's going to have the biggest impact. I think next up, it's don't get stuck in pilotitis. If you're going to work with AI, you need data, right? And if you run 53 pilots across 2 years trying to find the best platform, you've lost 2 years and you've probably lost another 3, because even post-pilot, you probably will narrow down the 53 to 3 and then to 1, right? Actually just like understand like who are the top 3 vendors. Maybe do a bit of a mix, like work with emerging companies, work with some more scaled companies, reference check them, because, companies like FYLD are now widely deployed, but like do a bit of homework to figure out who can I just take a bet on and run with versus how can I be paralyzed in my organization by pilots, which generally that they don't move the needle. And, I think if people are actually hard on themselves, what did I want to prove with that pilot? And was it even possible to prove it with doing a pilot? Like 99% of the time, the answer is no. So you got to be strong, have some courage, but like figure a spot where you can have true impact for your company.
Yeah, I love that. That's good advice there for sure. So as we start to kind of wrap up the conversation, a couple rapid fire questions for you. The first, what is the phrase modeling the future? What does that kind of mean and look like to you?
To me, it's like we should be able to look forward 3-5 years and like begin to take this wealth of data from projects that we've delivered and say, like, with this scenario, what's the outcome, right? This should be absolutely plausible. And then we can start like managing out all of the risks and things that we see.
Yeah, I like it. What does innovation mean to you?
Oh, it means like that this industry is amazing and it's got innovation at its core, right? That's why we do mega projects. But now it's just rethinking, like, what is the next wave of technology transformation and how we're going to embrace it and keep being an amazing industry to be in.
Yeah, nice. How do people find out more information on FYLD or connect with you?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Shelley Copsey, quite easy to find, or go to FYLD.ai. You'll find our website and you can connect with us there.
Awesome. Final question for you, Shelley. If I could give you all construction power, you could snap your fingers and innovate one thing in the industry, what would you pick to innovate?
Gosh, that is a big one. I work for the field worker. For me, it's going to be like predicting how that day will play out and making the interventions. And it's a big job to do what we're doing, but I wish I could answer that question tomorrow, because I know it would solve so many industry problems.
Awesome. Well, Shelley, thanks so much for taking the time and joining the show today.
Thanks so much for having me, Todd. I've enjoyed it.
And now it's time for my Todd takes from this episode. First take. Digital powers better job operations. Technology isn't just about automating tasks. It's about creating smarter, safer, and more productive job sites. With real-time data, teams can anticipate risk, streamline workflows, and deliver higher quality outcomes without the traditional trade-off between speed, safety, and cost. Second take. Technology supports, not replaces people. AI and digital platforms work best when they elevate the workforce, not replace it. Technology puts power in the hands of field teams, giving them visibility, communication, and support that strengthens trust and culture across the organization. And finally, from blame to lessons learned. Construction has often defaulted to a blame game when delays or incidents happen. But the real transformation happens when mistakes become learning opportunities. By capturing and analyzing data, companies can reframe setbacks into insights that improve planning, execution, and safety for the future. Thanks for listening to this episode. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our sponsor, Great Tech Group, at asti.com for more information. You can listen to this podcast anytime by simply going to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, be sure to check out our website, bridgingthegappod.com. As always, I'm Todd Weyandt, thanking you for joining the conversation to model the future on the Bridging the Gap podcast. Keep innovating.